And be live.
Hi, how are you? It's Ellen Lewis from Crazy for You and Irina Shah. And so I'm doing something new tonight. Trying to, I am trying to, that was so weird. Okay. So I just muted the site. Anyway, we're going live to Instagram as well as YouTube and Facebook as normal. And I have my earphone in because I am listening to Arena. And when you go live on Instagram, I am hearing myself and I'm like, wait a minute, that sounds just like
Who is that lovely person out there?
what is going on? It's so weird. All right. So tonight, Irina and I wanted to kind of do a debrief about Rowan Connect. We were both involved with Rowan Connect this past time. And we wanted to chat about it. And Irina had the greatest idea to say, you know what, we should do this live and just share with everybody kind of what Rowan Connect is about and, what it's like from the side as a participant, to watch, which Irina, you did that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was my first time taking Rowan Connect class. So it was very interesting for me because they asked me to be interviewed on Rowan Connect as their thank you for me doing all the interviews about Rowan. They offered me to take any classes. So of course I had to take your classes because I just wanted to be part of that. So it was like very special for me.
So why don't you talk a minute real quick about like give everybody the backstory on your Rowan series that you did, because I think that's really cool.
Sure. Well, I blame it on you because you were the one who introduced me to Rowan when we went to H&H together. We were roommates at H&H and it was brilliant time. I had really lovely time. And you introduced me to people from Rowan. And as we were sitting and chatting with them, the idea came to me that wouldn't it be great to interview the entire Rowan team? And it hasn't been really done. Like Rowan has mini interviews of their designers and their people from the headquarters, but it's not the same because they are interviewing their own employees versus me being an outsider. And so that was like very interesting for they agreed to do that. They were a little bit nervous because they didn't know who I was. And we started with David McLeod, and he's the brand manager. So he decided to test the waters first before he was my gatekeeper. He decided to be the first, and he actually enjoyed it, and I loved talking to him, and it was very interesting conversation.
He's adorable, isn't he?
He's also like very knowledgeable and very passionate, and he's a great knitter. So it was very interesting to have this conversation. And then I got to interview some of the designers. Some of them are super famous designers. Some of them are newer designers. We talked also, I talked with Lisa Richardson and David again about how they choose what designs go into Rowan magazine. And of course, the cherry on top of the cake was my interview with Kay Fawcett. It was absolutely brilliant and it has been my long-time dream to interview him. So that was very special for me and truly unforgettable. So it was like very interesting. So in return, they asked me to be part of the Rowan Connect and interview me about that series and talk about like the interviews and what I've learned and how my viewers reacted. So I did,
Yeah.
and
So,
you.
so how did they? I mean, okay, and real quick, let me just say, if you are watching tonight and you have been part of Rowan Connect, if like you've done any of the classes or watched that or sat in any of the chat rooms, go ahead and tell us in the chat because Irina can see the chat as well. Tell us in the chat, what you saw and what you did and what your thoughts were, so that we can sort of hear from you, how you liked Rowan Connect and what that was like. So anyway, so sorry, I'm interrupting. You can go back to your interview.
Right. No, so it was interesting because like the tables turned, right? Suddenly you are not the one who is asking questions and questions being asked of you. And it was done by Carrie Kimber. So she was one of the people I interviewed for the series. And so she interviewed me back. um, it was an interesting experience because I don't know, I think she was as nervous as I was, basically.
Why do you think that?
Well, because like when you're interviewing an interviewer, it adds the pressure, So for me, it was the unknown of being interviewed, and for her, it was to interview somebody who, like, this is what I do, So we both were sort of a little bit nervous, but it was fun. There were a lot of people that I knew, some of my viewers, some of my friends joined, and there were a lot of very interesting questions that they asked. So it was an experience for me.
I remember last Rowan Connect, it was November, and I remember it was the same weekend that I had Arna and Carlos in the shop, and Trisha was in the shop, and she did an interview with me. So I had that interview experience. But I think it's so different because I love live because you can see who's watching, or I mean, not exactly, but you can see that there are people watching, whereas when somebody's interviewing you in the Rowan Connect concept, I couldn't see who was watching or whatever. Were you able to see?
I wasn't like, I couldn't see who was watching, and I couldn't see the questions people were asking. So Carrie was the only one who saw it. So that was adding a little bit uncertainty, right? Because you don't get that feedback of, like, do people even watch? Is there like one person watching or 100 people watching? You don't know.
Yeah, exactly. I felt exactly the same way. Do you think, like, does it matter? Would you be more nervous to know that there were 100 people watching, or would you be more concerned if there were like 2 people watching?
No, I felt like it was like I felt like Carrie was really well prepared. Like, she had very interesting questions, and the people that were participating were, like, very active. So, like, almost immediately questions were asked. So it felt like it was a good reception.
So I think I mean, from a technical standpoint, I think the way they do those interviews when they interview a guest, like they did you, I think that's almost like a webinar.
Right.
So the participants don't have access to it. Um, when you're teaching, it's really different, though.
I was wondering how you like that, because it's it's a lot of pressure to be teaching online in general, and especially in class like that, because, like, I took 2 classes with you. So the first class, I was actively participating. I had my needles with me, I had my swatch with me, I was doing everything you were showing. The second class, I was actually in my car, and I was watching it on my cell phone while I was waiting for my son to do his archery class. And I noticed that a lot of people, both in the first class and the second class, there were a lot of people with their cameras off and mics off. So it's like you don't get that feedback. You don't get the idea of, like, do people understand what you're saying? Do they understand what you're trying to show them? Like, how did you feel?
Well, okay. So I teach online a lot, because I have Sweater University, and I go online every single week, and I teach, cocoa knits online, and I have a lot of active in-person online classes, and they're great. And the difference, and I think you nailed it when you said that when people have their cameras off, and it used to be with Zoom and teaching in the Rowan Connect, it's more traditional Zoom. It's not like the webinar. So, like when you and I were interviewed, we couldn't see anything, but with the classes, you do see that it's Zoom, but Zoom has changed. So if people don't have their camera on, they don't show up at all, right? So there's no little black screen with their name on it or anything anymore. And you have to actually you can look and see how many people are there, but I mean, you're teaching. You don't have time to dork with a participants tab.
Right.
um, but it is very challenging to be teaching something as technical as kind of what I was teaching, and sort of conceptual, and not be sure that I guess I'm always worried that it's it's too easy, or it's too hard, or it wasn't clear enough, or did you get it, or did you already know that? Did you already know that?
When you see when you see people, you see their facial expression, you can see that they're nodding at you, or that they look confused, so it's easier to understand, like to gauge the reaction of the viewer. Whereas like if there's just black screen, or you don't even know who is watching. And plus
Right.
I feel like the edit pressure is, those classes were available for another 2 weeks, so there were people who couldn't take the class during the class, during when it was live, and they were watching it a week later. So you have to like keep in mind that it's not only for people who are in front of you, but also for those who gonna join like a week from now.
Exactly. And you really want to make sure that you go over everything. Like, I think there were probably a couple things, like when I did handcrafted, not homemade, and we're talking about, very basic seam. Um, a lot of people, I'm like, you probably already know how to do this. And the couple people who did have their cameras on were like nodding. And, in a class where everybody's nodding, or it's in person, it's tempting to skip over that. But like you said, when somebody's going to be watching this, after the fact, you really need to provide all of the information for all of the things that you said that you would do, and make sure that you cover everything. I think it's also challenging not to know, like, what skill level everybody was,
Right.
right?
Because
Did you
it's,
get a sense of that when you were watching any of that?
well, the thing is, I judge by myself because I'm one of those funky knitters. Because on one hand, I can knit very difficult technically stuff. On the other hand, I miss experience because I only started to knit 6 years ago. So I miss some of the basics, right? Like for example, I only ever knit 2 pairs of socks. So I noticed that for me, there was a lot of information that I knew and like it was easy, but then there was some little gems in that class that I was like, oh, I never thought about it this way. Like, oh, I never like paid attention to that. So I think there was something for everyone, regardless of their level of expertise. There was something, it was like, it was detailed enough for the beginners, but it was also interesting enough for more experienced knitters who might have just never thought about the technicalities of stitch. Let's say like they understand the fabric, but like intuitively, and they never studied it, right? So I feel like you did a brilliant job with that you had like all the different categories of experience covered.
Thank you. That's good. That's good to know. So, what kind of stuff did Carrie ask you in your interview, and what was the most nerve wracking? I mean, was she like gushy, or does she know what you do? Does she have a sense of the level at which you knit?
I mean, I found the most amusing thing that I found was that they readily admitted that they were very nervous after they said yes to me, because they didn't know if if the questions I ask gonna showcase the company from the wrong angle, because they have their brand image and they wanted to keep it. So I think it's like it took some time for everybody to relax and understand that I'm not there to stir controversy necessarily, just to showcase the talent of Rowan and also all the hard work that goes into putting this yarn and putting the magazine together and the books and all of the things. So I think she was asking me a lot about um, like my experience, how I started the channel, and how when I learned how to knit and what made me decide to start the channel. So it was like a lot of those questions, but she also asked me about my impression of Rowan. And what surprised me the most probably about Rowan was the fact that when you think about it, right, it's such a huge company. Like every place you go, every state has a flagship store. There are so many countries where you can find Rowan yarn. So you think about this like monstrosity. You think that it's like this huge, enormous company. And to realize that it's basically being run by like very few people, like a handful of people who all of them do multiple tasks, and you never know, like even if you DM them on Instagram, you don't know who is going to answer, and sometimes it's Chloe and sometimes it's David, and sometimes it can be Carrie, like whoever is on at the computer at that moment is going to answer you, so that was like really surprising for me, and we talked a lot about that. But also like the amount, how far in advance is everything planned. So, I mean, I think like I've learned tremendous amount about the company from those interviews.
So wait, we have a question from Phyllis. So let's see what Phyllis says. Yeah, absolutely. Phyllis talks about going over things and stating them. Right. I think that's absolutely true. And I think that even if you're taking a class that you've taken before, because that intuitive knitting class that I taught for Rowan Connect is just another title for a class that Ginny and I have taught many times in person in the shops, called Reading Your Knitting and Fixing Your Mistakes. But people have taken it as a beginning knitter and then again as a more accomplished knitter, and you hear different things, when you're ready for it. So thank you for that, Phyllis.
But it's also like what I appreciated about the class, that not only you taught how to fix the basic mistakes, but you showed like all different kinds, like in the second class, you showed all different kinds of how to connect two pieces of fabric together at different angles. And then you actually showed how to set in the sleeve and how many different ways was used in just that one piece of, garment, right? Like how many different techniques you use just to set up that sleeve. So it was very interesting for me because I haven't done that before. And I sort of assumed that it's the same mattress stitch that goes around all around. And I was very surprised that there is so many different methods that's being used just for one garment, And
you like in the round, right? You're a top down in the round girl, right?
Well, the thing is, like, I only started knitting sweaters this year, believe it or not. Like, I jumped straight to Shetland lace from the beginning. And so a lot of things that people start with, I'm doing now,
You just started making sweaters this year. Okay. It's been 12 months. How many sweaters have you knit in this 12 months? I know we're off the topic of Rowan, but I'm just dying to know, because every time I go to Instagram, I see you in a new sweater and I'm like, Irina, do you do nothing else?
Well, I think at least 8. I think I'm on number 9 now. But I'm going to put an episode together about everything I made in 2023. And I don't know how many items there. Like, I didn't make that list yet, but I know that I did 2 Shetland lace shawls besides those 8 or 9 sweaters. So it's been a busy year.
If I didn't love you, I would hate you.
I mean, I did this test knit, and this is, by the way, very secret. It's not been published yet. It's by Julie Knits in Paris, and it's super simple shawl, but it's with very special mohair. It's light as feather. It's under 50 grams. That took me 4 days.
Oh, because you were just on it? You just couldn't put it down, or what?
It was like, I don't know. It's such a tactile pleasure to work with this yarn that it's hard to, and it's simple enough that you can just watch Netflix and knit. So it just grows really fast.
So tell me about that yarn, because I always think in terms of like, okay, Kid Silk's is 25 grams and it's 232 yards.
Right.
And is that the same, or is this finer?
That was 50 gram skein, and I used probably around like 40 grams for this.
But in terms of the weight of the,
it was fingering, like the same, like light fingering, heavy lace kind of thing.
So how many yards per 50 grams?
That's a very good question, except I don't remember. I think it was, I want to say like 300 to somewhere there. Like it.
Okay. So it's more like Ito's yarn,
right.
Ito's mohair, which is a
I'm,
little bit finer than kid silkes.
I'm actually knitting now with Ito yarn, like funnily enough.
What is it?
I'm knitting now with Ito.
Oh, what are you making?
So I'm making a vest by Claudia Quintanilla. It's such a pleasure to knit with this yarn. It just like, I don't know.
Which Ito yarn is it?
So one is Kino, which is 100% silk.
Yes, we have a pile of that. I ordered at H&H.
And then it's held together with Sensai, which is
Yes.
60% mohair and 40% silk. So you
Ugh.
put them together. And when you touch that silk, right, it's called Kino. So when you touch this Kino yarn, it feels almost like linen. It's like a little rough. But then when you knit them together, it's like air. It's like the most delicious combination ever. You have to try it.
So I absolutely will. In fact, I will probably bring in the Sensei this spring for that because that it's just beautiful. I cannot wait.
Knit so beautifully together. It's like it just
Yeah.
like delicious.
It's so nice. So nice. So what pattern is that? You'll have to tell me. Maybe we can do something.
That's a good question. Well, I'll look it up while we're still talking about Rowan.
Okay. So I did have a number of people, I don't know if anybody reached out to you afterward, but I had a number of people, reach out. And I think it's nice that everybody has an opportunity to give reviews afterward. I was sort of anxious because I always say at the end of any class, I would love to hear your feedback, constructive criticism, always trying to improve. And Carrie said that she had gotten some feedback and she texted me this, or she emailed me something that had a little spreadsheet on there. And I'm thinking, do I want to know this? Because you say you want to hear the feedback, but oh my goodness, it's so terrifying to know. But a lot of people were sort of angsty about just having 2 weeks access to the classes. What do you think about that? What are your thoughts?
I thought it was a little tight because not everybody, I mean, it's long class, right? Like every class was like 3 hours.
The first one was 2 hours and the second one was 3 hours.
So it's like, it's a long time and you gave so much material in the second class. Like the first class was more sort of overall how to mistakes and like a little bit easier to follow. The second class was just packed with information. So I wanted to watch it more than once. And 2 weeks like make it a little bit tighter,
Yeah. So when I do a digital class and somebody, isn't that pretty? Hang on. That's lovely.
Olympia vest by Claudia
Yes.
Quintanilla.
So do you consider that, now that's that silk, that fingering weight silk and the silk mohair. Would you consider that, it's sleeveless, would you consider that a summer top or what?
I would probably just wear it on top of something else,
Or under a blazer.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
I mean, it looks like, or you can even put it on a little like t-shirt or something.
I don't know. I love that. I don't have an issue with mohair in the summer. I know a lot of people think that's insane, but the fabric is so light and airy. It just doesn't feel so wintry to me.
Right. No,
maybe not in August, but
no, it's very thin. I think you can put it on top of like colored shirt, or you can put it on tank top or something. Like, I don't know. It's like it has a lot of possibilities. And I'm not regularly vest wear, but this was so pretty that I had to make it. And I'm really glad that I got to try this Ito combination.
Beautiful, just beautiful. You and I are both. You introduced me to Bridget from Cowgirl. And I think her, some of that hand-dyed mohair might be really pretty.
Can I show you something?
You can.
The custom color.
Oh my goodness.
Mohair.
That is lovely. Did she just send that to you?
She was recently in Boston. So she came, we went for lunch together. She came here to visit a friend of hers and we got to hang out together. And she gave me three different skeins. One was the mohair, and then there is fingering and DK. So um,
You know,
I,
she's staying in the United States after VK Live.
yeah, we should, we're definitely going to hang out at the walk.
Yeah, I think that would be great. I'm going to come to New York and we can do something. Would it be fun?
I'm definitely coming to New York. So
All right. I think that would be great. What else was I going to tell you? Oh, I was going to say that when I do a digital class, and I have a digital version of those classes that I taught at Rowan, you know, people, it's more than it would cost to take the class at Rowan Connect, but then you own it. Do you know
right,
what I mean? You
right.
own that class. And I think that's kind of nice. There's a, you know, there's a trade-off.
I
But
think Crafty does that as well. Like they give you a year of you that you can rewatch it. So
then after a year, you don't own it anymore.
right.
So for me, it's like you own it until I don't have a business anymore.
No, I felt like I took a few classes and I really liked yours because it was very step by step. It was definitely very well planned. And it was consecutive, sort of like toppling the knowledge on top of the knowledge. So it was like you started with the very basics, the teacher orientation, and then suddenly like we found ourselves, inserting the sleep at the last hour. So I feel like I learned so much in those 5 hours. It was like
Wow.
a lot of information and very well planned classes. So if you guys haven't taken Ellen's class, highly recommend.
I did not pay her to say that. But thank you. But you don't take a lot of classes. I mean, you may not, I don't know. Did you take any other classes from other
I
people?
took some classes at Vogue Knitting. I took some classes at Rhinebeck. I took some classes on Crafty. So it's not like I only took your class and I'm saying,
Okay.
yeah, I have something to compare it with.
Okay.
Yours stood out.
Well, that's very sweet of you. It's always interesting. You know, we always look, when I say we, I mean me and the team at Crazy for You. We always look at the classes that are being taught at Vogue Knitting Live and at, you know, various festivals and such. And, you know, a lot of it really has to do with like the star power of the person. Like, I think Franklin Habit could fill 100-person auditorium and teach them how to knit a garter stitch scarf because they just want to be with him because he's so amazing, you know? And there are some teachers like that, and they could teach how to knit a garter stitch scarf, and it really, really wouldn't matter. I'm not that girl. So I feel like I have to put all of the stuff in there and make sure that there's like lots and lots of value because
Well, I mean, when I'm saying that like your class was very well planned, it didn't feel like you are rushing through material and
oh,
just
good.
trying to say everything that put it in those 2-3 hours, right? But it also didn't feel like you don't know how to fill those 2 hours. So it felt like well paced
Oh,
because
good.
some of the classes that I was taking, they would give you the handout and the handout would probably fill 4 hours, but they trying to cram it into the 2 hours. So you feel like you didn't even get through the material, right? So like I didn't feel that with your class.
Thank you. So, do most of the classes do handouts in Rowan Connect?
No, like it's only happened, like I only got the handout and well, no, that's not true. In Rowan Connect, I got handout for another class that I took. So they had some that you could print at home. But like usually when you go to festivals, they'll give you some sort of handout.
Yeah. I think a handout is really nice, but I feel sort of when I'm putting a class together for something like that, I don't want the handout to, because they send it out, you know, days in advance. I don't want the handout to sort of,
Substitute you.
yeah, take the place of it because then people, I don't think they're as engaged. So I use a handout
Like I
as a,
noticed that, yeah, a lot of times when they give you a handout, it's for a class that would use some certain pattern for that class. So there is like a pattern in the handout and all the materials. So it's not the complete class, right? It's like more over like highlights and materials that you need, kind of thing.
would you teach Shetland lace for Rowan Connect?
Well, it's so funny because Carrie asked me if I would teach, and I told her I actually got asked by one of my local guilds, knitting guilds, to teach a class on Shetland lace. So I've been toying with the idea. I actually made some samples, so we'll see. Like I promised them that maybe in March I'll teach it. So if that class goes okay, then maybe at some point.
Yeah, good. Good, good. I think you have such a skill. I mean, it's amazing what you do.
Thank you.
Would you teach it so like would you teach Shetland lace pattern on Shetland lace yarn? Because I feel like there's this skill of the stitches, and then there's just the dealing with yarn that's as finer than a human hair.
Right. Well, I'm one of those people. So since I never set foot on Shetland, right, and I taught basically myself how to knit it. That's part of my reluctance of teaching, because I feel like there are probably people who have knitted Shetland lace all their lives and they would know better, and they might live on Shetland and knit with Shetland yarn. But even like I was interviewing Anne Junsen, and she and her sister, like both lifelong Shetlanders and Shetland lace knitters, and she was telling me that she knits with silk and she knits with merino. So it's not necessarily that even people who were born and raised in Shetland and knitted lace all their life only knit with wool from Shetland. So there is some room for playing, you know.
Yeah, I think so. And I think also as long as you're straightforward, like when I teach, I always say, this is the way I do it. There
Right.
are lots and lots of ways to do this thing, but for this class, this is how we're going to approach this.
Right.
Right?
And I
And s-
found it interesting during your class, actually, because you know that I'm a combination continental knitter. So the stitch orientation is the hot topic, like every time I put a video, because every time I show the way I purl, the first comment I would get, doesn't that twist the stitches? So I have to talk always about, yes, it does twist the stitches, but then you knit through the back loop and it untwists the stitches. So as long as you understand how the fabric's supposed to look, and you touched a lot on that this is how you do it, this is your technique, but there are other techniques out there. And like as long as people understand that what we're trying to achieve is the knitted fabric, right? And how you're gonna get to that final result, it's up to you. Like you can do the Portuguese purling, you can do Norwegian purling, you can do all different kinds of techniques, except the fabric's supposed to look like that.
Exactly. And the thing about it is people say, like you said, people are asking, doesn't that twist the stitches? No, it doesn't twist the stitches. It puts the stitches on the needle in a different orientation. If you knit them in the typical way, then yes, you'd have a twisted stitch. But the way you work them, they're not twisted at all. They're perfect.
Right. And it's funny to me because like I always get comments of like, yes, I used to knit like this, or I used to purl like this, but then it's very complicated when you do like knit two together or slip knit. And like to me, like I don't even understand the comment, right? Because it's like as long as you understand what the fabric's supposed to look like, you know how to put those stitches, how to knit those stitches so they oriented the right way. And I feel like it was very for me it was very informative to sit through your class, because half of the time I intuitively understand how I'm supposed to knit, but I didn't know how best to explain it, and you did that for me because you showed that there are different ways to achieve the same fabric, and it's all about orientation of the stitches.
Right.
So like it, I really enjoyed that first class a lot.
Well, I'm so glad. I was worried that, people who do knit in and, have their stitches like every other row, their stitches are mounted with the leading leg, with the right leg over the back, that they would be offended or whatever. And that was not my intention at all. But you do have to sort of establish a framework and say this is how we're approaching it here, so that we're talking about it. So well, that's really good. So we have a fun time coming up in May together, right? We're going to H&H.
Well, first we're going to walk knitting because you're gonna be
Right.
there and I'm gonna be there.
Yes, absolutely. That'll be fun. So I have the Rowan booth and I have my booth and I have a Noro booth. So I'm going to be in that same spot.
I'll be there. You know what? We'll make time when I'll be there. So if any of you guys want to come to say hi to me, we'll do a meetup there.
Well, I'm coming up on Wednesday, so maybe we could do we could do a live walk around and
That
chat.
sounds like a good plan. We did that at H&H, so we can do it again from Walk Knitting Live.
Yes, and I've figured out that how to do the microphone so that so that that's better. We are learning all the time, getting better and better. So
Well, we weren't born YouTubers. We are learning how to be better YouTubers.
exactly. So next week, and are you going to do the same next week? Next week. I'm going to do a look at what I knit this year, and it's not anywhere close to what Irina has knit this year. Are you going to do that for the end of the year? Your end of the year video?
I'm gonna try to put a list together this week and film the video of everything I made this year. I'm still trying to finish one more project, and I just agreed to another test knit for this. That's gonna have to be done before Vogue knitting. So I'm going strong to finish the year.
I can just say that I'm really glad knitting is not a competitive sport.
It's true.
I don't feel competitive with you.
No, but like honestly, I told you before we started that I just had the major flood in my basement this week, and knitting is what kept me sane through this period of time because it just brings such a peace, and it's like such a meditative state of mind and such a meditative feeling for me that it takes me through all the tough times in my life and through so I'm so grateful that it's part of my life.
It is a really important method of self-care, I think.
And if you guys ever just feel sad, do this. Like instant happiness. Grab.
I don't think that yarn you buy has to be knit up right away. I think it's
Oh no, like
visually appealing, right there in a basket. There's no reason you have to knit it. I mean, sometimes it's doing its job just to be there, making you happy because the color's so pretty.
I'm a firm believer that I have 3 different hobbies. One is yarn collecting, one is knitting, and one is pattern collecting, and they have nothing to do with each other.
There might be some overlap, but not necessarily.
Overlap, yeah.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. So, all right. Well, I hope you have a wonderful holiday. Thank you so much for joining me, Irina. It is always such fun to be with you.
And I can't wait to see you in New York, and Happy New Year to all of you. Merry Christmas. And
Absolutely. Happy holidays, whatever you are celebrating, and Happy New Year. And we will see you very, very soon. So, thank you and good night.
bye.